Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. My name is Sue, and welcome again to another episode of Life Talk, where I continue to share with you my experience with narcissistic abuse and my journey to recovery. And if you're listening right now, chances are that you are in a narcissistic relationship or you know someone who has been. Let me reassure you right now that narcissistic abuse is a real mental disorder, and therefore, the trauma that you have experienced is not your fault. Your only fault was in believing that you were entering into something that was mutually beneficial, and that turned out to be so wrong. So just remember that there's help for you. Seek counseling and talk to a friend or anyone else who you can trust. Okay, that being said, in this episode, we're going to look at the narcissistic abuse cycle. So, I have been looking at the correlation between economics and the rate of single parenting for different countries, and there is a definitely a correlation between the poverty line and the prevalence of single parenting, you know. So diseases and illnesses usually have a general pattern of progression. And in narcissistic abuse, there are three main phases. And the professional calls these phases idealization, devaluation, and rejection, and sophisticated terms. And basically, at first, what it's saying is that at first, I mean, this person thinks that you're all that and a bag of chips, and then after a while they realize that chips do get a little stale. Although you're still chips, but you kind of get a little stale, and then say, don't want anymore, don't want anymore. Or you could really look at it like a pair of shoes. When the shoes new, you wear them and you wear them, and it's the best pair of shoes. And as the mouth of the shoes start turn up, and the bottoms start wear down a little, you start wearing it a little less and a little less, and you might buy a new pair of shoes, and so you start to alternate, between the not so new pair and a new pair, and then after a little while, the old one, you just stop wearing it altogether. You just abandon it. You just stop wearing it altogether. So it's like that, right? When the relationship is new, that's the idealization part of it. When it's getting a little stale, that's the devaluation part of it. And then the rejection is the part where them just don't want you anymore, right? That's basically it. So if you have been involved with a narcissist or have been in a relationship at all, you will remember how great things were at the beginning. So this is the idealization phase, and at this phase, the level of compatibility seems so high, and there's so much love, and you can see no fault in that person, and that person can see no fault in you. You were willing to move mountains for that person, and there's nothing you wouldn't do to help them to improve. All right? A narcissist will choose you because they see qualities in you that they really want to hoard for themselves. They can't be you. So the closest thing to being you is having you for themselves. And at this stage, they really put you on a pedestal, and they will just pour all their affection on you gradually. However, they begin to see that, like any other human being, you have flaws. You're not perfect. And you also begin to see through their superficial veneer. And, that's a major blow for a narcissist, right? In my case, I was glorified in the beginning, I was glorified because, as I was told, I was talented in so many things. I was bright, I was well spoken, I could handle myself with a little Spanish, I could handle myself with a little French. I was told I had nice eyes, I had lovely high cheekbones, And these were basically superficial qualities. These were things that either these were, things about my physical appearance or things that I could do, not about who I was inside, right? So, anyways, as the honeymoon period wears off and things become routine in a normal relationship, there is still love, and the couple grows closer together and they learn how to work together to achieve goals. Not so in the narcissistic relationship, not so. They basically lose. Let them lose off of you. Yeah, like that. You're not so brilliant in their eyes anymore, right? So that leads us to the second phase, and it's known as the devaluation phase. So this is where the narcissist begins to devalue you. They begin to mentally compare you to other people and to see all your imperfections. And so this is when my big forehead and my big feet became the subject of ridicule. Yes, whenever I made suggestions as to how we could achieve things together, I was accused of being pressuring. You just have pressure me so. You just have pressure me so. So as I verbalize my expectations for emotional support and the creation of boundaries in our marriage, he seemed to crave more and more his personal space. And at this stage, you're no longer good. At this devaluation stage, you're no longer good for his ego, because you are beginning to see the imperfections and you're beginning to, suggest ways in which he can improve. But they don't like that. They don't like that. They don't like that. When you start demanding more than just the icing on the cake, they don't like that, right? When you're expecting substance. So this is when they begin to hunt, or they could have been hunting before that. So this is where they're coming home late, flimsy excuses like falling asleep in the car, not hearing the phone ring, and worst of all, when you verbalize your concerns, they start turning things around and play the victim, and then they blame you for the problems in the relationship. They blame you for making them feel uncomfortable. Okay, yeah, sounds familiar? Yeah. So after the narcissist has successfully secured a new victim or victims, they will probably stick around. If you still have more goods to offer them, they'll stick around, or they will leave you, or they will just become blatant in their disregard for you, forcing you to probably leave them, after which they will say you left them. So, finally, you come to this stage, the rejection stage. That's when you're washed up, you're a has-been, you're done for in their book. It's over. And in a normal relationship, this is when a couple is thriving together. This is a stage at which a couple is really thriving and gelling together. This is where people are usually settled, they're pooling resources together, achieving common goals, fulfilling each other, etc. This is when you know what the other person is thinking, and you can complete their sentences and lovely stuff like that. And there's a mutual respect for each other's feelings. And although there will be disagreements, both parties are able to really communicate and resolve their differences. But narcissists, on the other hand, do not communicate how they feel, because they are afraid that they will be rejected. And that is because they don't possess the emotional security that really allows them to say what they want. Because subconsciously, they feel unworthy, because their sense of worth was not developed as a child. And this is usually because they were either rejected emotionally or physically by a parent. So they basically created a false image of who they really are. because the reality does not, their reality does not match with who they really, with what you're really expecting. They don't value themselves, and therefore, they can't value you. They don't think you're valuable enough for them to be honest with you, to be faithful to you, and to invest in building you up, because they just did not learn how to do those things, right? So instead of investing in a relationship with you, they usually bounce around from relationship to relationship. And when you begin to see that they bear a false image, of who they really are, they become fearful. They become fearful, and they think that surely you're going to leave them. They don't think that they're good enough for you to stick with them and help them through their difficult times, help them through their personal struggles, their internal conflicts. So listen to this. I'm going to give you an example of, a typical narcissist. This is an experience that I had with a relative that I hadn't seen I hadn't seen or spoken to her for a long time. And so we had an extended conversation on the phone in which she was expressing to me that her husband was not home yet and that she was getting concerned. So I was there talking to her, and she was texting him, and he finally responded to the text, and her and I were on and off the phone till late, like early hours in the next morning. So he finally answered his phone at about 11 p.m. and said, she told her he was having a drink with his friends. So I decided that, since my husband wasn't home, I was going to stay up with her, chatting and wait for him to come home. So at 1 a.m., he still wasn't home. And then he wasn't responding to the text messages, and he wasn't responding to the phone calls either. So at 3 a.m., he still wasn't home. So I went to bed, and I decided that I'm going to, just go to bed and call her in the morning. So when I called her in the morning, she told me that he actually came home at about 5 a.m., got his sporting equipment together, and went out to play cricket on a Sunday when there were chores at home for him to help her with. So she said that when she asked him where he had been, he responded with a question. What? So me can't hang out with my friend them. Me can't hang out with my friend them. Me a big man, And this is a married couple with 2 sons. So I spoke to her a little later, trying to really console her and really trying to get a better understanding of her situation, because clearly this, was not an isolated incident. So at the time, I wasn't aware. No, I wasn't aware, of these things as I am aware now. But based on the way that he treated her, it was just common sense to deduce that her husband could not have had a good upbringing, could not have had a good relationship with his mother, and he could not have had a good role model, a good male role model growing up, because he definitely had no idea how to treat a woman. So when I asked her about his parents, she said to me that he grew up with his mother, actually his grandmother, who spoiled him, and he actually did not have a good relationship with his mother, right? Who had him at a young age. She got pregnant for a policeman who was working in the area, who subsequently left the area before he was born, who he did not meet until in his late teens. And God, what a heavy basket for a man to bear. And this is the case of so many of our men in our society. No proper role model, male role model, to teach them how to become a man. And a mother who is not cognizant of the devastating effects that these kinds of situations can have on a young man. So it came out that my relative's husband here was a womanizer. He was a prolific womanizer. And in the next few days, she ended up having conversations with a woman that he had been seeing. And as often as it happens, the woman, you know, the woman heard a very different story about this man's marriage status and his life overall. So by now, my relative was in distress and expecting her husband to show some remorse and to try to make amends. But to her utter distress, her husband told her that she placed herself in the position to be hurt by speaking to the other woman. And I was dumbfounded that someone could be so disrespectful, so forward, so presumptuous, and so cruel. I was dumbfounded. I wasn't sure at the time whether I would have called the other woman as she had. I wasn't sure. But eventually my turn came and I did call the other women. I did. I didn't call to fight nor argue because that's just not me. I simply wanted to confirm if in fact the relationships actually existed, because I don't like to accuse, which they did confirm. I wanted to know whether they planned to continue, whether this was a serious thing, and whether they were aware of my husband's marital status. And for the most part, in both mine and my relatives' situations, the women were totally unaware that the men were attached, and that the stories that followed were of a man. The stories that I heard were basically of a husband that I did not know. I thought I knew him, but I didn't. These women told me things about my husband that I did not know. And somebody said, well, the matey always know things where the wife them not know. Right? So, ladies, the struggle is real. And it will keep replicating if we do not find a way to start investing in our children's emotional well-being now in a more intense and intentional way. We have to allow our heart to bear better fruits. Not our heart, our hurt. Sorry, we have to allow our hurt, the hurt that we're feeling, to bear better fruits for our sons and daughters who are now primed for emotional distress if they have been abandoned by their fathers, right? And that's why counseling is important, so that you can become a healthy person, so that you won't live your children's, you won't allow your children to have a childhood where they are suffering from the hurt and from the anger that you're feeling, So if you're a parent who is away from your child, look into it, because no amount of money can compensate for the void left in the life of a child by an absent parent, right? I have heard people say that they will not remain in a relationship or a marriage for the sake of a child, and I'm not telling you to do it, but isn't your child worth it? Isn't a child worth it? The discomfort of you working things out so that they can have a more balanced upbringing. I mean, the world is hard enough when you have to go out in this uncertain world, than to have a shaky beginning. Life is even harder, right? So, throughout the course of a relationship, people fall in and out of love. People do fall in and out of love. But commitment and professional help, commitment to raising your children and making the best of it, can make a difference. My grandmother had a saying, my great grandmother had a saying that I often repeat, and it's that if your fingers stink, you cannot cut it off and dash it away. If your child is rebellious, you can't just unfriend or unchild that child. You have to stick it out with them until they get better. There is no guarantee, absolutely no guarantee, that a new relationship will work out. And as we see, as we've probably all witnessed that some people, they just keep moving from one relationship to another. They keep bouncing around looking for something new, hoping that the next relationship will work out. So you move this year, you live with this woman, 2 years later you and she have a youth and it don't work out, and you just move somewhere else to do a next woman. 4 years later, that one then a work out, and then you have 3 youth and you just move to somewhere else with a next woman. And I mean, it's senseless, right? So as I've said before, narcissists over a lifetime will leave a string of broken relationships because they simply do not know how to commit. They don't know how to invest. They have no idea how to invest in the well-being of another human being because no one taught them. No one taught them. And because they know how to get their foot in the door, they enter a lot of women's lives and mess it up, just make a total shipwreck of people's lives, But beneath the smooth exterior that they display is a chronic cheater, is a compulsive liar, is a con artist, is a manipulator, right? Is an emotionally stunted little person. And I think you get the picture by now, right? So, however, no one is beyond redemption. That's the saving grace. No one is beyond redemption, and God has given us the will to do whatever, to ask whatever in His name, whatever we want in His name, and to have it done. And God will not deny us of any good thing. So although narcissists don't usually change, because change can be painful and invasive and time consuming, but the bottom line is that change is possible, and I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that because the Bible says it. The Bible says that God is not willing that any of us should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And this brings to mind two types that are represented in the Bible. They're the types of good and evil. And we can see this coming out, in Cain and Abel, Judas and Peter. Although they had the opportunity to change, Cain and Judas, they suffered because their pride and arrogance was just, sky high. Abel and Peter, on the other hand, they humbled themselves and repented. And, God honored them and prolonged their life and their ministry, right? So we see, though, where narcissists have a perpetual struggle with pride, like Cain and like Judas. Narcissists have a struggle with pride, and they don't easily admit to weaknesses. They would rather just run than mend, because they really do not understand forgiveness and they do not trust themselves to change. So they remain in denial because of shame that really is not theirs. None of us chose our parents. None of us brought ourselves into this world. And none of us is responsible for our upbringing. But we are all responsible. We are all responsible for the outcome of our lives in the end. So choice here is the operative word, right? Choice is the operative word. And a lifetime of hurting others is going to reap suffering in the end, because you might hurt people now, and they'll hurt and they'll cry and they'll stop and they'll move on. But for you who continue to do it, the end for you is not going to be good, because life repays. So if you are a narcissist, get help. If you are suffering from narcissistic abuse, break the cycle. Many of you suffer in the cycle because you feel, stupid for allowing a sweet talking player to seduce you and take advantage of you. But Don't blame yourself, sister. Don't blame yourself. Rise up and talk. Rise up, shake yourself off, talk about it, get help. And that's basically it. You're gonna be hurt. You're gonna feel hurt for a long time, but talk about it, get help, and recover. You can recover. So until next time, like, subscribe, and leave your comments below, and take care of yourselves. Bye.